Punk'd Pooch. I recently saw this animated short film show up on my YouTube page as its art style caught my attention with its expressive design and colors. So what better way to start my YouTube journey than with a fairly polished piece of media from a talented group of animation graduates. For these kinds of short animation films, I don't plan on criticizing them harshly for animation errors or poor voice acting, with the understanding that these projects are probably the first time that these creators have worked in a bigger animation pipeline environment, and therefore will not be judged in the same light that mainstream films and shows are. And this will be true for all short films and indie animation projects that I review on this channel. However, I will be discussing the overall themes, aesthetics, and any alternative interpretations the work might offer, as well as any major issues with the narrative that might make it difficult to understand the theme or story. So what is Punk'd Pooch actually about? The short begins by introducing us to the four band members, Fifi, Darcy, Janice, and Tilly, as they prepare for their show tonight. Fifi and Tilly meet up backstage, and we're given the impression that there is some conflict between the two. The show starts and the band begins playing when Tilly, showing her ego and embodying the idea of a bitch, tries to steal the spotlight. Fifi, not wanting to let her continue, also begins trying to steal the spotlight, leading to the two starting a little competition between each other during the show. During their competition, we see flashbacks of the two as kids and the moment that Tilly leaves the band to go solo, giving us some greater context for the conflict between Fifi and Tilly. The performance ends with Fifi breaking her guitar and starting an argument with Tilly about feeling like she and the band were just being used to prop up her own career. Fifi and Tilly begin fighting, the crowd erupts in the chaos, and the short essentially ends there. The credits show some stills of Fifi and Tilly getting arrested, while Darcy and Janice are left sitting on the curb, contemplating their life's decisions after the shit show that just occurred. Something I really enjoy about this short is that it really has room to continue past the short amount of time we spend with it. I could easily see a short series in which we explore more of Tilly's story and her attempt to go solo, as well as her eventual downfall that led her to reunite with her old band. There's also plenty of room to see more of the relationship between Tilly and Fifi, and the gradual shift in Tilly that drove their friendship apart. They may not have had much of a spotlight, but it would be interesting to see more of Janice and Darcy and how they joined the band. Janice seems like the kind of nice character just trying to be the glue that keeps her friends together, and Darcy seems like one of those underrated silent characters that could easily become a fan favorite. We're given enough story and context to be invested in seeing Fifi and Tilly reconciled, and I'm disappointed that the story ends where it does. The art style is also one of the strongest things about this short, with lots of simple shapes, sharp angles, and bold black outlines. It reminds me a lot of both Agretsuko with its line weight and Panty and Stocking with its saturated colors and exaggerated proportions. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if the creators took some inspiration from these works at some point to help create their style. The scene where Fifi strikes a chord on her guitar and everything but her and Tilly are drowned out is probably the most visually interesting of the entire short. The simplicity of the backgrounds and the contrasting colors really help to sell how at odds the two ex-friends are and how they are completely immersed in their competition and conflict, ignoring everything else around them. Also, the Sonic fan in me that was looking at some of the design work for the short film has to point out the Sonic here in the background art, especially with the creators acknowledging at the very end that they were inspired by Sonic. The animation itself is also pretty smooth, no distracting jankiness or missing frames. Characters are expressive and their movements are cartoony, and upon watching the animation several times over, there don't appear to be any noticeable animation errors or mistakes that might break your immersion. I know most of these things might sound very standard, but I think that pointing them out and praising the creators for it means a lot, considering that animation in and of itself is just hard, and that this was made by a small group of students and not a studio is a huge achievement worth celebrating. After all, it takes a lot of time and effort to create something that maintains your sense of immersion while having you focus on the narrative and characters rather than the technical aspects that might remind you you're watching a student film. Honestly, there aren't many negative aspects to harp on with this short, other than the fact that it is just a short, and that we don't get to see more of the group's dynamic and story. However, we can get a fair amount of information about a lot of the foundational work of the world the short takes place in. Something that I want to do with these short film reviews is showcasing the design concepts and the inspiration that goes into these pieces of work. It's easy to see the finished product and think that it's way above what you might be capable of achieving, but seeing the rough sketches, the initial concepts, and bios for the characters can be really endearing, and I want to be able to share all of those things with you guys. Taking a look at some of the early concepts and designs, it looks like nearly the entire crew, except for Tilly, had the most changes to their character throughout the process. Fifi looks so much more serious in her expressions as opposed to her final concept, Janice looks almost a bit dopey, and not gonna lie, I thought Darcy was a guy before the encyclopedia clarified she's a girl. Some of the early storyboards looked like they included some extra scenes of Fifi's dad dropping her off at the pound. There's a shot of Fifi and Tilly getting pissed at each other in front of some staff, some alternative shots of Fifi and Tilly's time as friends, and I think some of the shots even show a character from the encyclopedia, Claire, as being present in the short before it was scrapped. The character encyclopedia was definitely the most fun to look through though, as it contains information about the characters that we may not have gotten in the short, but also extra information about the main characters as well. Fifi's mother has more than 10 kids that she doesn't talk to, and she kind of radiates hoe energy. Meanwhile, her dad used to be in a band and is a bit of a hippie. Kind of explains why Fifi herself is described as a bit of a rebel, getting in trouble at school a lot. Tilly's parents explain a lot of why she has such an ego, like her mom owns a company and is described as emotionally distant, and that her dad probably has ties to the mafia. Janice and Darcy are actually stepsisters and have probably the most wholesome family out of the entire encyclopedia. Janice's bio mother got divorced and remarried to Guy Furry. Never thought I'd see a furry version of Guy Fieri. And Janice even has 2 twin daughters and a husband that died in the Great Chocolate Epidemic. Guy Furry is also the biological dad to Darcy. Claire Balto, who I believe is being depicted in some of the early concept scenes, apparently left the band when it was formed due to creative differences. I also like that there's a bit of drama stated between the character Dutch warning another character, Fido, who can actually be seen in the crowd during the film telling him to stay away from Fifi. And in Fido's description, he's just outright labeled as Fifi's bootlicker and a simp. And of course, I can't forget all the little dog-based puns and language sprinkled throughout the encyclopedia, like Poster energy Fifi likes, and Red Ball energy that Fido likes, the fact that Fifi listens to bands like System of a Bone and Linkin Park, and, just Guy Furry. I love that artists and animators can get so engrossed with their characters and the world they live in, so much that they start creating like little relationships and personality traits, and things that we may never see in the show. It truly shows the amount of thought and passion that goes into creating these films and how the creativity extends even beyond the project itself. I know that it's not always a possibility, but I would hope that the creators get a chance to bring these characters or even references to these characters back in future projects. I feel like I've heard several stories of cartoonists that turned some of their smaller projects or concepts or sketches into actual shows, and seeing something like that come around full circle is always inspiring. Overall, I think Punk'd Pooch is definitely worth watching, and I encourage you to follow these artists and support them in their future endeavors.